You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 249, Captain Rex Part 1. That's right. Tonight, we'll be looking back and looking ahead, actually, at some point, to yet another amazing character in Star Wars, and one that I don't think many people would have guessed that, would be as dear to their hearts as Rex would become. And joining me tonight to back me up on this man crush or clone crush or whatever we're calling it, please welcome to the show, CT9029, or as we all know and love him, Mr. Jonesy. Jonesy, how are you?
Did I take the niner in there?
There's a niner, 9029.
Doing well. How are you doing this week?
I'm good. I'm tired, busy. There's all kinds of stuff going on and just juggling a lot of things. Too many plates right now, but we're getting by. Yeah.
Good deal.
Been waiting for this one.
Yeah. This one's been a long time coming. And as we've started exploring these episodes, we're just like geeking out all the time over it. So it's a lot of fun to do, and we'll kind of get into it here in a little bit. But yeah, we're having a great time doing this one.
Yeah. So again, this will be a two-parter. So we'll kind of break that down here in terms of what that's going to look like. But before we do, let's get into some news and a little bit lighter, I guess, on the news stuff. There's probably some stuff in here that we could kind of sink our teeth into if we really want to. But I guess since we last met, we've got Solo out digitally now. So I'm going to ask you the most obvious question. Have you seen it?
I have it, but I have not seen it yet. Just haven't had the time.
Yeah, that's kind of what I've been getting from a lot of folks. Like, it seems like, at least of the people that I know that are Star Wars fans, they've all bought it. They've downloaded it digitally, right? But when I ask them, have you seen it yet? They're like, no, I haven't seen it yet. And I'm like, So, nothing's changed there, I guess, from the movie release.
Well, I'm trying to get through I'm listening to the audiobook right now, which actually I'm enjoying a lot more than I anticipated I would. It's actually really well written. I got a couple little quibbles with it so far, but really enjoying it. And so I'm wanting to get through that so I can then go back and look at the deleted scenes and rewatch the movie as a whole to see, what the parallels were and what was actually cut and brought into the book. I want to see the rest of the book first. So that's why I'm a little bit behind. I mean, plus all the TV I've had to watch for Clone Wars and Rebels, and starting to do some research for your show here in a while. So trying to do all those things, but yeah, I want to get through the book first and then come back and see, okay, what are the deleted scenes that fit in, and do they kind of fit with what I had in my head?
And the only thing that was odd, and this is just me being picky, it was released on a Friday, which I thought was bizarre because normally, those come out on Tuesdays,
right?
But for whatever reason, there was a Friday. Do you have any insight into why they chose a Friday release?
None at all. I really don't follow digital release dates that closely because I don't know why. I just don't keep track of it like I do the physical copies. But I have no idea why it was a different day. Yeah. This whole movie has had a very interesting life cycle. Yeah. So at this point, I shouldn't be surprised by anything, and I'm not going to look into any of it more than what's on the surface, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that's pretty much status quo for that movie. All right, well, let's move on from there and talk about Star Wars Resistance. I almost said Rebels. Star Wars Resistance, we got the Aces teaser, trailer, BTS, whatever we want to call it, but this came out sometime last week, maybe right after we recorded, but it's about a 5-minute clip that kind of breaks down the top 5 or the 5 main characters as part of this Aces group. What did you think about that? I mean, I know we've kind of talked about Resistance, and I'm gonna keep beating this drum. It continues to look freaking amazing to me. Absolutely. I'm like so excited about it. But beyond that, in terms of the characters, we got some pretty good details here. At least, we got some better details than we had initially.
We did, yeah. We get to sit down with each of the voice actors, and you get to see some time on screen. You get a little bit of action with them. They give you some background about where they're at and what they're looking for, which is great. This is a lot like the last teaser we saw, which we both really enjoyed that one as well.
Yeah.
And so we're getting this nice flavor. And it's really cool because Donald Faison was on there. Of course, I loved Scrubs when Scrubs was out. And so I'm a huge Donald Faison fan. So it was really cool learning that they actually specifically named his character after him.
Yeah, so the character's name is Hype Phazon.
Hype Phazon. Yeah.
And, his last name is just that good.
Yeah. Oh, God. What species is he?
I think he's Rodian.
Rodian? Yeah, he's a Rodian, but it's unlike any Rodian we've really seen because he sounds like Donald Faison.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is insane and crazy, right? But he's got this giant personality, but he's a huge Star Wars geek, and loves this stuff. So for him to get one named after him is pretty awesome. I love all his Robot Chicken stuff too that he's done.
Yeah, he's got so that character Hype Phazon it, and that literally is Hype, HYPE.
Right.
He's supposed to be, an amazing pilot. Well, all of them are really super cocky, full of himself, full of hype. And then he's like the sponsor guy, right? His like jacket's full of sponsorships. He's, his ship is all tagged with different sponsors as well. So he's just kind of soaking in the limelight. We got Tora Doza, who is the daughter of Captain Doza, and she's like the younger, everything's happy, want everybody to love one another kind of character. And
she's got the mad skills of the group too.
Yeah, exactly. She's supposed to be like the best pilot, and she's kind of maybe, I guess she's supposed to be like the best friend or close friend with Kai, our main character, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
The one I'm interested in is Griff. Is it Griff Halloran?
Yeah,
he's the ex-Imperial TIE pilot.
Yeah, curious how that one's going to work out.
Yeah.
How does that fit in? Yeah. How does he get where he's at? To where he's? I guess it's unclear if they're actually. I guess they're not working with the Resistance yet, right? That's just going to be our title.
Yeah, I think they're right, and I think they're going to get thrust into the war at some point. And I would imagine early on. I don't think they'll, play that out all the way to the end of the season. But early on, I think that war is going to kind of consume them and bring them into it, and they're just kind of a casualty of that. But yeah, he's kind of brooding, grumpy. So I'm looking at him as the Mike Rondo of the Aces team. So kind of curious to see how that plays out. Yeah, right. Is it Freya Fenris?
Yeah.
So she's is she a Mandalore?
I don't think so, but she sure has the facial structure and everything else like it.
Well, she had shoulder pads, and not that that's an indication that she's a Mandalore.
Well, they're all kind of wearing some sort of. It's hard to tell if it's body armor or if it's just padding around the flight suits.
Mm-hmm.
So can't really tell. But yeah, she's the real serious. All business. All business.
They colored her as being trustworthy and in having your back if you need it. So yeah, we'll see how that one goes. Not the most interesting. And then the last one is Bo Keevil, which they don't really give us a lot of information on. They just said he's a stunt racer. He's got a mysterious past.
Didn't even give us the voice actor. Yeah.
Yeah, no. Unless it was I didn't see him either.
No, yeah, I was like, I rewatched it. I was like, we're just gonna do this. Okay, cool.
So yeah, I did like they mentioned that he was the Evil Knievel type character. So that pulled on my heartstrings being a kid of the 70s. So yeah. So those are the 5 aces. And again, if you haven't had a chance, go look at the trailer. Some pretty really amazing stuff there in terms of animation. The voice acting sounds pretty solid too, from what little that we've been able to grasp so far from the different releases or teasers and stuff that they've done. So it just looks really good. I'm pretty excited. October 7th is when this.
And we've talked a little bit about the type of feel we're getting for the show right now is this more lighthearted, spirited type of show. They're racing to make money and things like that. I have a feeling after these first handful of episodes, we're going to see this different shift. I mean, this story is not going to end where it begins, right? So for the folks that might be a little bit concerned, it's trending a little bit younger, and definitely it's designed for younger children, kids. I think Donald Faison said 10 years old. It's not this isn't the destination either. And I think you're going to see, and we've already seen some glimpses of that. Man, every time I see the X-Wings fly by with this animation, I get real excited about that and seeing things like that. So it's not going to end where we're starting at with this flavor we're getting. They're just trying to amp up the excitement, get kids to look at it and say, yeah, that's something I want to flip on. Not at 10 o'clock on Sunday night, but
right.
We already talked about that though.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on. We've got, I guess, one other thing here. This is the Marvel solicitations for December. So for comic books, and interestingly enough, we got the first 2 titles from. So what they did is they came back and said they were going to be releasing these. I think they call them Age of Republic, Age of Rebellion, and Age of Resistance, and they were going to spotlight. Was it 5 characters from each of those eras? I think it was a total of 5.
I think it's, or 4 or something like that.
It's a small number, right? But they're going to do these kind of backstories that we've never seen before. That and of course they're probably overselling this and hyping it up, and as they should, because these are solicitations and they want the comic book store owners and all that to put in huge numbers in anticipation that people are going to go out and buy these things. But nonetheless, we're supposed to be getting some backstories and just things that may have kind of like the Forces of Destiny, I guess if you want to call it that way, in comic book form, where we'll see bits and pieces of who that would later play out in that character development or a famous scene or costume or just something that has weight and merit to it. So the first 2 that were announced was Age of Republic Qui-Gon Jinn #1, and the other one was Age of Republic Maul #1. So we're getting another Darth Maul story here. So either one of those, did you read the synopsis on either one? And if you had to pick between the 2, are you excited about them both or one or the other?
I think I'm more excited about Qui-Gon because a lot of his backstory has been, basically eliminated with the new canon. We don't have a lot of new canon of his younger days now. So this will be the first time, if that's the era we're in, and hopefully before we see him train, or maybe when Obi-Wan's younger, we get this different dynamic with them. We may have to wait till the book comes out, Master and Apprentice, to get that. But I'm just, a little different dynamic for him, though. Let Qui-Gon have a little spotlight here and learn a little bit more about him. He's a very popular character for only appearing really in one movie. Yeah. And we're really just jonesing for any kind of information about him that we don't already know and that we can actually formalize as canon now.
Yeah, I guess the one thing that stood out for me on the synopsis here is the very last line that says it's guest starring Master Yoda. So they're calling him out explicitly. So I just wonder if they're going to, I don't know what era they'll be kind of covering, how far back they go. If this is a young Qui-Gon, older Qui-Gon. I think based on what I saw from the cover, it looks to be not around the same time as maybe Phantom Menace, but he's not a Padawan either. So
right.
Or any younger, I should say.
Well, that's a good Jedi to pair him up with too, right? I mean, anyone you can kind of have a different counterbalance to Yoda. And I think Qui-Gon is a good, strong character, even in this age or in this stage of his life, especially if he's already matured enough to where he can challenge some of the status quo. So I'm really curious to see what they do with it and where they take it.
Yeah, it says now in the face of a mission that goes awry, he's forced to confront his conflicting beliefs. What will Qui-Gon uncover about his loyalty to the Jedi versus his loyalty to the Force?
Yeah, rubbing your hands together. This is the stuff we've been asking for.
I know, right? Exactly. I was about to say, you're getting my $4 for that one. So, and then there's Darth Maul.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
We've had a bit of Maul now. We're getting a little bit more Maul next year. But again, there's probably some great stories in there for Maul too. I'd still like to see what his training with Sidious looked like. And get more of that flavor too. I don't necessarily care about when he was a child and things like that. But I'd like to see as he started growing up and maturing and some of the trials he had. We've had some exploration of that in the comic books, and they've done a really nice job of it as well. So I'm interested to see how they take that and shift a different perspective or a different timeline of his story there.
Yeah, and I think you're going to get it and I won't read the whole thing, but the very last line of that synopsis says, "Could Maul have had another path in life, or was he always fated to follow a dark road?" And then it says, guest starring Darth Sidious. TV's Darth Sidious.
TV, yeah. As seen on TV. So, yeah, we may get some of that from that. So, but we've got December. So look forward to those coming out. And I don't know, by then we probably, I don't know. Maybe we'll come back and cover some of these because depending on the content and what we get from it, there's some good nuggets in there. I think we should, because this would be good topic stuff to talk about. Yeah, especially if these are one-shots, that's easy enough to do.
Yep.
You don't have to build a whole arc. They did say #1 for each one. So I haven't looked into enough to know if this is supposed to be a recurring title or a short arc. I thought they were more like one-shot type of things, but I might be wrong with that.
Yeah, and I didn't look either. Usually they'll show like how many pages, and that's a good indication of whether or not it's a one-shot versus, a limited 3-arc, 5-arc, 6-arc series, that kind of thing.
Right.
But yeah. Well, I guess we'll find out here soon enough. All right. And with that, we will be right back.
You know what's not smart? Job sites that overwhelm you with tons of wrong resumes. But you know what is smart? ZipRecruiter.com/Cantina. Unlike other job sites, ZipRecruiter doesn't wait for candidates to find you. ZipRecruiter finds them for you. Its powerful matching technology scans thousands of resumes, identifies the people with the right skills, education, and experience for your job, and actively invites them to apply. So you get qualified candidates fast. No more sorting through wrong resumes, no more waiting for the right candidates to apply. It's no wonder ZipRecruiter is rated #1 by employers in the US. And right now, my listeners can try ZipRecruiter for free at this exclusive web address, ZipRecruiter.com/Cantina. That's ZipRecruiter.com/CANTINA. ZipRecruiter.com/Cantina. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire.
All right, so let's get to the main show, the main man, Rex himself. So before we jump into this, we just wanted to kind of make a couple quick notes. Rex his history is so vast, and we're talking about X amount of seasons of Clone Wars. We've got Rebel stuff in there. Not a whole lot of the stuff in like the novelization and comic books since Disney took over. So we kind of threw out all the legend stuff, as we've done with most of these Clone War kind of character breakdowns and episode reviews and that sort of thing. But so we are going to try to focus really on Rex's journey, going from a soldier to who he is as a rebel later on in Rebels and maybe even Return of the Jedi. We want to focus on some of the key relationships that he's had. There's a vast number of characters throughout his career and life that he has really cool moments with, but there's just too many that we couldn't, this could turn into a 6-art episode type show if we did everybody. And then we want to focus on some of the key development milestones. There's very significant, poignant moments that I think that we'll be touching on where he does change, he does mature, his character goes through different phases, and we ultimately get the person that we all love and care for most. So with that, I think the first question you threw out there was, why did we get Rex instead of Cody? When this came out, really, I remember my first reaction was, well, who is this? And why am I not getting more Commander Cody? Because Commander Cody he looked awesome. He had the great gear, the great bucket. So why didn't we get him? And it was very intentional because they wanted to keep Cody for the movie. They wanted to not have to handcuff themselves in order to explore a character and do different things with him. They could still work Cody in and out, but so they created Rex. And you and I were talking before the show. This was a character that it was kind of a background character to us. He's there, but wherever they were, we had no idea what they were going to do with this character. But and that was the beauty of that early decision. So I thought it was just worth bringing up just to say, we got Rex because they didn't want to touch Cody. They wanted to give themselves the freedom to explore different things with the character, not have to worry about, well, where's Cody at in the movie, or not that he's that visible, but they didn't have to concern themselves with that as much. Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I don't disagree with anything there. In fact, I think the only other thing I would maybe add is we had the same question come up when we were doing Bad Batch, because the episode starts off with, Commander Cody, you're in charge, and you're going to take the Bad Batch, you're going to land, and oh, darn, he's hurt. Rex, you're up. And then Rex steps in. And I think that was just kind of it's playing to the same thing that you're speaking about here. And there's probably this larger arching character development that they wanted to do, or that they could do. They had more freedom, more flexibility, I think, with Rex than they did with Cody. And Cody was, I don't want to turn this into a Cody dissection, but his character was so by the book. He was very, what's the word? He was rigid. Very, he was very rigid. They had no flexibility, and that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. I think that he was definitely needed in the Clone Wars. And I think in some of these episodes that you can see where his skills play a huge role in being that type of a commander. But for what they were really trying to do, and speaking again to what you just mentioned, where we didn't really know what was going to happen initially, what they were trying to do was really give us a character that we could relate to, a character that spoke to individuality, personality, uniqueness, and how do you do that with a character who is a clone? 99.9% of him and everyone else like him that's a clone are identical, and yet they couldn't be any more different once you get past the physical part of them. So this, I think they had a lot more, freedom, flexibility to do that with Rex and take him in put him through a lot of different things and not have to worry about stepping on the movie or, that kind of thing. So, but it's a great question.
Yeah, maybe it's a good segue though. So how would you describe Rex or CT-7567? What kind of characteristics as we meet him and as we know him kind of early on in the Clone Wars, what kind of words would you use to describe him?
I mean, he's definitely I'm going to speak to this initially. So you'll probably hear me add other words later down the road. But at least initially, he's unassuming, and he's a captain, so he obviously stood out somewhere for them to acknowledge him. So from that perspective, we know that he's tactical. We know he's strategic. He seems very fearless. He seems extremely loyal, and he is a little wound up tight at the very beginning. And I'm going to talk about that later because I want to reference a line that comes out of one of the episodes that we'll probably hit in episode 250. But he is a little bit more wound up. He's kind of fresh off the boat. Really didn't have a whole lot of experience. And just kind of by the book, again, it's not a character when we first see him outside of that. Those particular characteristics, we really don't get a whole lot more from them. And I never really expected that we would, because the first 3 seasons really are focused on Anakin, Ahsoka, Kenobi, right? And then that's on the good side. And then you've got Grievous and Dooku and everybody else on the Separatist side. We don't really even get a sense that Rex is there. He's got little minor bits and roles, and he's kind of this ancillary type character, but they don't really give you a lot in terms of his characteristics and who he eventually would become until we get to season 4, or maybe on the cusp at the end of season 3. So it's kind of a lot what we see on face value. What you see is what you get with him initially, and I think that's going to change a little bit later. So I'll stop talking. What about you? What are some of the characteristics for you?
No, it's an interesting topic to bring up, because when before the Battle of Geonosis, it's like, how do they actually differentiate themselves? Yeah. I mean, I'm assuming they're training and they start to see, for them being genetically identical or practically identical, like how do they actually differentiate themselves with, skill in this area or that area? Because as we saw in some later episodes, being brave and doing things that, might get you killed, but you still do it anyway and you succeed, gets you rewarded. But how does that happen, within your pods, right? And those types of things. But so that's always something I've been curious about. How do they actually segmentize the ranks? But you really hit it on the money for me is loyalty in particular, especially to his general and to both Anakin and Obi-Wan. He's the quintessential soldier. There's no questions asked. It's the right thing to do. He trusts the orders he's given him. And that speaks a lot, I think, to the relationship that he was able to build with them, which seems a little at odds with some of the other clone troopers where it's much more rank and file. And we don't see him with that flexibility that he gains later on, but he still has a little bit of that, especially with Anakin. He has adjusted to how Anakin works. And so he has this ability to adapt. I think that's also, we see much more as he matures as a character, but we've seen that even early on with the way that he interacts with Anakin, and even a little bit with Ahsoka, I think, as we start to see their relationship, blossom just a little bit.
Yeah, I think one of the other things that I threw in there, I threw this in a little bit later, but I want to just kind of talk about overall, what were some of the characteristics, or I guess what did we like most about Rex, and his character? What was so appealing? And I've kind of already hit on a lot of this stuff, but just for my own personal take on this is he was just really that role model or the model, I guess, or the poster boy or an example of what Filoni and crew were trying to go after with this, a clone trooper that, he was like everyone else, and it would become completely unique in his own way by the end of, the Clone Wars series. And then we get even more of him developing as a character in Rebels later on. But just kind of a personal thing for me, like the Clone Wars was not interesting to me. And that may sound sacrilegious, but it really was not that interesting to me apart from the Jedi. And the reason why was because for me, growing up as a kid, like I did not like the stormtroopers, right? I was always the good guy. I always liked the good guys, never liked the bad guys. And when we got Attack of the Clones, and we got to see the clones, I always had a negative connotation when I thought of clones, because I knew, in my mind, at least back then, was, oh, these guys are just all going to turn into bad guys. And in very much, my view was very much in line with a lot of other people, I think, at the time, was they're just not interesting people. Why? They're just clones. And we see this in some of the other characters in some of the episodes where people treat them as, droids with a pulse, or fodder, right? Or just a means to an end. And he just, and that part of it was never interesting to me. And I really like the fact that I stuck with this, with really investing into these characters, because I got a lot out of it at the very end of it. But and I mentioned this to you before we came on the air. This was dumb me. I didn't realize what Filoni was trying to do in creating these characters the way he did, and showing us that just because you are identical, and just because you again, 99.9% of you is completely identical, every one of you has a propensity to be good, and everyone has the propensity to make your own choices and do what you want, and have that individualism, and have the freedom and free will as a human being, as a living being. So for me, that was one of the things and I thought Rex, to kind of bring back to Rex, I think for Rex, that he was, one, he represented all of those clones that took on their own unique identities. And so we got to see a lot of that development and a lot of that uniqueness through, his eyes and his experiences. So yeah, that's kind of, I guess, where, what I've always liked most about Rex is just, he was that, that model, right? He was the example that they were trying to give us here with regards to uniqueness and personality.
So, since you've been so eloquent and deep, I'm going to be really shallow and say he had awesome armor and the guns.
That's fine, because that armor was cool too. I'm not going to. Yeah, sorry.
It was. That was the first thing that appealed to me. And again, not knowing what they're going to do with him, and he wasn't overly interesting at the time, but the awesome armor he had, right? We hadn't seen, we had seen the colors come a little bit about with the toys and whatnot, but to actually see that on screen, and the pistols, he was this more gunslinger type of, commando that we hadn't really explored before on screen. And that was what was fun for me. And as he matured and I got into the story more, because your opinions of Clone Wars was probably pretty consistent with most people's early on, right? Why are we getting this? What does this mean?
Yeah, do we really need this?
Do we really need this? You left the theater, you're like, what did I just watch? And, and it took a while for it to really get going. And what's funny is you watch these episodes over time, and you can hear the actors are a bit wooden when you watch that first season in particular. But when you listen to the later seasons, it just works, right? They're just perfect. They're settled in. It's great. But you get that more wooden performance early on. But yeah, I got to be honest, the armor I thought was the coolest thing. That's what drew me into him in the first place. Cody wasn't much different, right? Because again, we don't have, when it was in the movies, you don't really have much to differentiate them. They're not given an identity at all.
Right.
They're just a faceless mask. And so...
Yeah. Well, one had an antenna on their shoulder.
Right. Yeah.
That's so.
Our differentiation was by color, and then the toys explored. Oh well, this crew's got jump packs. These are jump troopers. These are whatever, and then we started putting numbers to them all, and that was the only differentiation we got. We didn't get this is their name, this is their story, and so for them to take a central character and start to do that was really important for us to see, and really change our opinion of clones in general, much like kind of what you've gone on in your journey.
So that's kind of our opening shots, initial thoughts, at least on Rex. But so let's start with seasons 1 through 3, even though I know we've kind of been hitting on this and talking about it already. But in terms of Rex's ideology, do you think, or I guess, what would you say initially out of the gate? What was that like? And then maybe even later on, how did it change, or what was different about it?
I think early on, when we look at the movie, we have this sense that he's already adjusted to how Anakin likes to lead. And again, it's difficult to understand exactly how long after Battle of Geonosis that we're seeing, but presumably it's not that long, although Anakin does have longer hair by this point. But we get that, we have a little bit of an idea that he's adjusted, but when we get into the actual season, especially as we get into rookies, we start to see that he is more protocol based still. They get on the landing base at Rishi, and they start criticizing the rookies because they're not doing this, they're not doing that, they're not following the rules. Now Cody was there too, so it was definitely them feeding off of that a bit too. But you get this more protocol based, a bit more rigid structure. There's a firm command line. But the one thing that you definitely see amongst his company is this absolute trust and faith in his leadership, as in Rex's leadership specifically, and that they'll follow orders, but they have the confidence that he is going to lead them to success. They are going to not die as many under his command. And again, that goes back up to the generals. But I think that's what I saw, is that it was a lot of, he's still very much in the clone frame of mind, though he has to be a little bit different, but we're still going to follow the things that work because they work and they've been defined.
Yeah. He's, and I'm going to steal some of my other thunder a little bit later here, but a lot of, I think, his ideology, I think he goes in with maybe this core set of values that he gets just from being a soldier that we've already talked about. But then once he gets put under Anakin and that particular general, he really starts to model a lot of those same traits and behaviors and things from Anakin himself, right? They're very similar in a lot of different, I mean, they couldn't be any more different in terms of, who they are, backgrounds and all of that. But, Anakin is always the first one in. He's always leading the charge. And when Anakin's not there, well, let's just say when they are both there, they're both the first two you see running in every freaking battle, every single shot. They're the first two that run out together. When Anakin's not there, Rex doesn't change. He's still the first one that runs out. So, you could argue that that's just his personality, but I would make a stronger argument that maybe, but the fact that he's got his general leading him, that kind of trickles down into to his group as well. So he was, he was definitely a leader that led by example. Definitely one that trusted his men. I think his men trusted him. There was, he never once, even early on, and we got shades of this, he was never one to, just leave his soldiers behind. It was no one gets left behind kind of an attitude, right? So, I mean, these are the people that you would want to look up to in a war. These are the kinds of leaders that you would want to have, leading you and trusting that, in you and you trusting in them kind of thing. So all of that was just, I mean, he was, set apart in a lot of different ways, particularly those. So,
well, we see that he has this undying belief that in the Galactic Republic or in the Republic, right? It is the way, it is the right way. It is worth defending and dying over. And this immense sense of duty that is their purpose in life. Even if it means to lay your life down, that is what you were there to do. And it doesn't seem to bother him at this point that, millions of his brothers do die, consistently for this cause. And we'll see that a little bit later in a different conversation, but we do see this undying trust on his part of the Republic, and that it is right, and it will persevere, and it will take time. It will stand the test of time, and what they're doing is vital.
Yeah, and we'll get to, I think where the cracks start is in the Deserter, right. And then certainly by the time we get to Darkness on Umbara, that's where there's a huge, you got
fissures,
paradigm shift there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, you're absolutely 100%. You're right. He is the poster boy of the army, of the Grand Army. And he believes in it. It's what he knows, and this is his identity. Going on from there, I think we want to kind of talk about his connection with some of the other, brothers. And you have an interesting question here about whether it was odd that he viewed Camino as home, because he does make reference to that a few times. And
right.
I guess my quick take is probably not, only given the fact that, they really don't have any kind of uniqueness or identity coming out of Camino. We know they're there for a a long period of time, and they, are bred there, created there. They live all the way up until their teen years, and then they come out and go fight, that kind of thing. So I guess for me, I can see him looking at that as home. I think really, though, what's happening here is it's one of those underlining threads of the clones and how they define what home is. I think that changes for him, definitely changes for him over time, especially when we get to Rebels. and really how they define what brother is and what family is. Those are all kind of three themes that I think we see with the clones. That changes very drastically, especially when we look at somebody like Rex or Wolf or Fives and these guys and what they end up, the relationships that they build and how strong they build these over the course of the war, and how the war kind of shapes a lot of those relationships and those bonds. That definitely changes over time. But I think initially, again, speaking here, yeah, this is his home. This is all he knows. Again, it's just an extension of very limited personality and uniqueness that he has right now.
And that's what he more or less says. This is the closest thing we have to a home. And so this is when the Separatists were going to attack Camino, both when they were trying to protect it on Rishi, but also later on in ARC Troopers, where they actually do make a full-scale attack. I think the other thing, to touch back on what you had made a comment on a few weeks ago, was wouldn't the Caminoans had bred out desires and things like that? And this is another one of those parts I think still plays into that part of that conversation of forming connections to things. So not only connections with your brothers, that makes a lot of sense, right? Because you have to trust, you have to know where everyone's at. You're with these people all the time. But to make a connection of home when really, I mean, you can see why that is. For you and me, that makes a lot of sense. They spent, probably 20 years on that planet, or the accelerated life of a 20-year-old on that planet, training. And but now they're all over the place. They go everywhere. There is no home. Home is usually a starship, right? Or a big cruiser. And so, I mean, that's more or less their home now is really the people around them. But he even said as much, right? It's the closest thing they have. And so it was worth defending. And clearly it was strategic in the war because of the it's a cloning facility as well as the DNA sample. But it was just curious to think about that of the clones considering something home rather than this kind of more nomadic way of thinking, because that's the lifestyle they've presumably lived for several years over time.
So before we get into I guess maybe the one episode that we will cover tonight, which is the Deserter, which is a season 2 episode, we want to touch on just Rex's view, maybe even just more of his relationship with the Jedi Order, Anakin, and then Ahsoka. So I think we've kind of probably talked about the Jedi in a roundabout way, but really, his relationship with them is they are the superior officers. And I don't think he really even has much of early on, at least at this point, you would not even expect him to kind of challenge orders. And that's a huge change that's going to happen later on where he does when we get to Umbara. But at least early on, I mean, they are the law. They're his higher authorities. And again, he is the model soldier. So that's pretty much, I would say, I don't even know that there's really much more there in terms of his relationship there with the Jedi Order itself. But with Anakin, I think that's where things are a little bit different, because Anakin's not your typical anything, really. He's atypical in just about every way. But he values people, right? Exactly. Yeah. Anakin goes out of his way to call them. He doesn't call them by their numbers. He calls them by their names. He spends time with them. Yeah. Getting to know them. Yeah, exactly. To know them, right. Same thing with like Yoda. There's the very first episode that we get from Clone Wars is a great episode where Yoda's talking to them as though they're human beings and not clones. And I think it's a really, and I'm probably getting too far away from what we're trying to talk about, but again, it just speaks to that whole theme about, people like Yoda and people like Anakin. They refer to them as human beings and they treat them as such. And we know they're going to be characters that we'll be talking about later that don't do this for them, right? So it's a different, I think it's eye-opening for them as well as clones. But with Anakin, yeah, it's a very different dynamic. It's a different relationship. Anakin's still pretty young. He's got a lot of experience, but he also seems pretty open and eager to listen to people like Rex and like Cody and just about, a lot of a number of other folks that he finds to be, of good, strategy, good tactics. He sees all that. He admires that and he looks up to that, almost to a fault. And maybe that's where, we get into the Sidious piece of it all. But yeah, he's got a very unique relationship there.
We see the other way around too, though. We see that trust in him from the Jedi too. I mean, and it's not just because they follow orders; it's because he has good ideas, and right. Again, they have to be willing to hear that too. But he's able to motivate his company and make them effective, right? And a good leader should be able to do this too. And I think Anakin in this regard, and you had mentioned it earlier, you lead from the front. And Rex had made a joke, and I think it was Rookies. They asked if someone wanted I think one of the team wanted to go first, and he said, "No, I'm always going in first." He's always going to be that one to lead it in. And so, and I think he sees that from Anakin, in particular, because Anakin is always right up on the front line with him, and a lot of great parallels there of how they lead and inspire their teams.
There's a great moment. And this is the one line I'll probably just steal from next week's episode, but there's one line in particular when we get to the Umbara series where, Anakin and Rex, and this is for season 4, I think, by now.
Right.
So he's really changed a lot by now. But there's one scene in particular where they're kind of getting pinned down and they're kind of up against a bank and they're kind of strategizing, talking about what they need to do. And Rex, without any hesitation, just tells Anakin, look, this is what we need to do. We need to move our troops because there's a bombing coming. And if they overshoot the bombing, it could hit our troops. Anakin doesn't even flinch. He just looks at him and says, good thinking, Rex. And then he almost takes orders from Rex at that point, right?
Right.
And that kind of speaks to that relationship that I think that, the special relationship that Anakin and Rex have in the ability for both to, at that point, they're just a good performing team. And they're willing to trust one another when, like that. And I think that's what kind of, again, trickles down to his company, kind of like the point you were making earlier. It's all just one really good working, well-performing team. And it starts with the general. So it's a really cool relationship. Again, speaking specifically to Anakin and Rex and what they're able to do together. Anything else, I guess, for you on Anakin before we move to Ahsoka?
No, I think that's good.
So Ahsoka's interesting. Because because that first relationship that we get, he's not condescending. I don't think I'd go that far as to say that, but I think he is taken back, as everyone was really, that somebody as young as her would suddenly be thrust into the war and put on the front lines and given the title of a general. And, we get that one cool line where he mentions that, experience outranks, anything really. I forget the line exactly, but
right.
His relationship with her is, I've always saw both of them as, even though they've got a huge age difference, they both, in my opinion, kind of grew up together, and they grew up together in a lot of different ways, forged by this war, like the experiences that they shared. And I think that's why we get that really cool special moment, if I could jump ahead to Rebels, when they finally see each other in season 2 again for the first time. They both have this really cute smile on their face. They both walk up to each other and they just give each other a hug, like, they're brother and sister, like they're two long lost friends that grew up together many years ago, 16 years ago. And here they are again, reunited. So, and they both are very similar in terms of how they developed as characters and what they learned in the war and what strategies they learned and everything, because both of them fed from Anakin again. So in that regard, they had the same kind of teacher. They had the same kind of instructor and leader. And I'll throw Kenobi in there as well. I mean, there's plenty of moments where they leaned on him for a number of other things. But I think they have a really cool special relationship that we didn't really get to see a whole lot of, I think, in the Clone Wars. And we get more of it. Well, not really. We get a little bit more in Rebels, but it's a very unique and special relationship.
Yeah, I mean, he was instrumental in her development, because when she joined up and was Padawan to Anakin, she was cocky and arrogant and just wanted to jump in. She was really eager too, which is great. But for him to give her that dose of reality and bring her back, start to bring her back down to earth. I mean, Anakin went the rest of the way for it, but was really telling about, and I think you're right. I mean, I think he did look at, like, who is this kid? Yeah, she outranks me, but who does she think she is? And always treated her with respect, right? But at the same time, he wasn't going to blindly turn over his company and his unit to an unexperienced Jedi who didn't really know what she was getting into and was in a little bit over her, or in way over her head to start the series. But you're right. Over time, that starts to change, and she starts to mature, and especially as we get into the later seasons. And it was really nice to be able to watch. And like you said, as soon as we get into their later years, for them to be reunited is a really great feeling. And hopefully we'll get to see a little bit more to make that give that a little bit more depth as well.
All right, so let's talk about the Deserter. So this is season 2, episode 10.
Right.
And I don't have a synopsis up right now, but basically they're on, oh boy, I don't remember the name of it. Solicitations?
Seleucimi? Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I forget the name of it now. Seleucimi. Let's just go with that. Yeah. But they're waging war there. Excuse me. And there's a moment where Rex gets shot. He gets basically sniped by a commando trooper. And he gets hurt, and he ends up. They take him, and they're trying to find some place to kind of help him recover. I think what's the medic's name?
Jesse.
Now? Yeah. Sorry, but he's trying to find him a place, and so they come across a farm, and they run into the mother of these 2 little kids that live on the farm, and she allows them to kind of take shelter in the shed out back or whatever. And turns out that really who the father of all of this in this little farmland, little oasis, is an ex-trooper or ex-clone. And his name is Cut
Lawquane.
What was this? Yep, Cut Lawquane. And he's defector. He's basically a defector, and somebody that left the war.
He's a straight up deserter. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I wouldn't say defector. You're right. He's a deserter. He just left. But this is kind of like I said earlier, this is the first moment that we start to see Rex break a little bit. And it's very intriguing as to why. But one of the themes that's kind of playing in overall in this episode is this idea that we have the freedom to choose. And specifically what Cut mentions is we all have the freedom to choose not to kill for a living. That he just made a conscious decision that he's not going to do that anymore, that he wanted something more, something bigger, something more unique. He wanted to have a family. He wanted to have kids. He wanted to go live his life on a farm and not be tethered to, all the war mongering that was happening at the time during the Clone Wars. And so, again, it speaks to free will. It speaks to his individualism. And again, going back to what I've been saying, they're identical. They look identical. They talk identical because they're clones, but they couldn't be any more different at this point in their careers and the way they are. Even his personality, he just seems like a normal human being that's been living on a farm, grew up on a farm his whole life. He's almost like erased all shades of what it means, or the some of the stoicness, or some of the blandness at times that we get from some of the clones that we see in the series. But I'll throw it over to you. I guess in terms of this particular episode, early on, what else are we seeing with Rex and his character development here?
Yeah, we have this first philosophical difference of opinion between clones for Rex. So Cut explains that during the Battle of Geonosis, basically he was the lone survivor, and he saw that he just had total despair and hopelessness, and the emptiness that came with seeing all of his brothers die and not having an explanation for it, and just seeing the slaughter that happens. And he just didn't understand it. He couldn't come to terms with that. And so he left. When Rex hears this, Rex has a different perspective on it, because he starts to see, okay, this is the most pivotal moment in the history of the Republic. Without the Republic, Cut, this life doesn't exist for you. You can't do this, because if the Republic goes away, your life as you know it will completely change, and you will not be able to enjoy this with your family. You won't have a family, most likely. So we get this first rub of, defending what you have versus choosing your right to live in the way you want, and that clones have zero right to choose, because you are bred to do one thing, and that's it. And I was curious as we started listening and watching this, has Rex ever come across the type of hopelessness and emptiness that Cut describes after Geonosis, where life had no meaning? They were expendable. And to this point, I want you to answer that too. But to this point, I'm guessing he probably has not. We saw it a little bit in the movie where the odds were stacked against them, but they always have this weird belief that they're going to find a way to make it work. But when there's no Jedi around, you get this sense that because the clones even say it every once in a while, wish we had a Jedi around right now. They have confidence they can do it, and they have the duty that they're going to do it anyway. But has he ever had this moment where it's like, wow, there is no way out, and what is all this for? What does my death mean in the grand scale of things?
Yeah, I don't know if he's ever had that moment, to be honest, because at least not here. I think he's still. I mean, he identifies with the war because it gives him purpose, and this is very common. Again, I was never in the military. My whole family was, and I got plenty of folks that I know that experience this. But just taking it real quick to war, right? The war breeds a sense of purpose in a lot of folks. It breeds a sense of understanding. I know what I'm supposed to do. I know things are very clean, very clear. As chaotic as they may be, it's defined and it's stable. It's almost kind of an unstable stableness in terms of, what they're supposed to be doing. And with Rex, this is where he's starting to see someone that doesn't see that and has taken it to the extreme where they've deserted, almost turned his back. He doesn't call him that. I don't think he calls him like a traitor or anything, but to some extent, that's what he's done. He's really left all the other ones to kind of, all the other brothers to go out there, fend for themselves, die. And
I think he called him a coward early on. Yeah.
Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah, he does. He mentions that he's a coward. And then there's a cool line at the very end where they rehash that label, I guess. But
right.
It was interesting though too, because I went out and I was looking. I really started getting into, and I don't want to get too deep any more than I already have. But there's a interesting thing out there that I was reading. It says, "Remember that purpose is not just about self-fulfillment, but how one contributes to the success and endurance of larger entities. Whether it's your company, your employees, your family, your community, you're fulfilling to remember that individual work and doing your best to fulfill individual responsibilities contributes to the survival and success of something bigger than yourself. It's a shifting how you think about purpose to all facets of your life can change your attitude." That's from military.com. So I guess this is what they sent. There's an article out there that's specifically for, veterans that have left the military and suddenly don't feel like they have a sense of purpose. And I think this is where Rex is starting to kind of, again, starting to break. I think he's starting to, when he sees this, he sees that it is possible. It is possible to leave the war, have a different sense of purpose, have a different sense of family, because that's really what this was about, right? Cut was saying, I got a family, I have kids. And they have a great little scene in there where they're talking about what does family mean, right? To him, Rex's belief at this point is that it's all about duty. Duty to the war, duty to the Grand Army, duty to his brotherhood, and that sort of thing. And Cut's like, well, my duty is to my family, and look what I've got. Look how happy he is. And Rex even makes there's one point in there where he's kind of mentioning, he talks about the kids, and he says, "You've got beautiful kids," and they get into this really neat conversation about, well, wouldn't you come on? He says, Cut says, you've thought about this too, right? You've right. wanted a family at some point, and he never says that he does. But you get the sense based on, the way it's animated that, Rex is looking around thinking like, oh crap. Yeah, I have thought about this before. So I think this is where all this doubt kind of just starts to trickle in, and it plays a huge part, even though we really don't get a whole lot of this other than at the very end where Rex just kind of turns a blind eye, and pretends like, this never happened kind of thing. But this is a pivotal moment for him because I think that small, slight amount of doubt that gets put in his mind about what life could be like and whether or not there is a bigger purpose in life outside of being just a soldier, outside of just being a captain or a clone or serving generals and that sort of thing. I think this is where that seed gets planted. And later on, there's going to be a number of other things that really kind of play into ultimately him, pulling the chip and saying, this is not what I need to be doing, right? I need to choose my own kind of path.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that scene up because I like Cut's response. I know you better than anybody could possibly know a person because we are identical, right? So he knows his thoughts, even if he doesn't want to vocalize them and admit them. And I thought that was a really nice scene. I agree with you there that was a really great scene. And it was, I still don't know how much he's thought about it though. I mean, why would he? I mean, he may not go to the extent of family and things like that, because again, when you look at the environment around you, the Jedi don't have family. You know, the people you save, you're really not mixing in with at least they're not showing us that they're really mingling with the people of the planets they're on or anything like that. Now we know in regular military life, when you invade somewhere, you're with the people, you know, whether you're liberating it or something else, you interact with the people in some capacity, but we don't necessarily see that as much in Star Wars. But so it's interesting to see how much he's been exposed to and how interesting that is to him in the first place.
Yeah, there's just on that individuality, just recalled another scene where it's part of that same conversation. There's some really great moments, thinking back now, a lot of great moments between him and Cut, and they really pack all of them within a span of about 2 minutes. But, there's one part in there where he's questioning why he has a unique name. He says, you have a name rather than a number. Why is that? And Rex says, perhaps our leaders feel it's a more efficient way of distinguishing us.
Right, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, and he says, more efficient than a number? He says, I doubt the Kamonians think that way. Still, a name has to make you feel unique, especially in an army where everyone looks and talks like you. And then he says, well, it goes on to say, actually never thought about it. Yes, you have. Well, how do you know? And that's when they get into, them looking exactly the same and yet still, he tells me to admit it.
It's interesting that Cut gave himself a last name.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Right. I mean, we don't hear a last name with any clones who have left the army. And even when Rex and Wolf and company leave, they're still just Rex and Wolf, they're no different. Yeah. And Gregor, there's there's what they've always been. So it's really interesting that he has a last name now. So why don't you think Rex turned Cut in then?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it was more about I don't know. I'm going to get all mushy here. I think it's because in his heart, I think he saw how happy, because they really played up the kids a lot in this episode. More so, I think they gave him these really cutesy moments where they're, they're talking and they're super cute and all that.
Right.
And they don't really show Rex that much responding to that. But I think, at least in my own headcanon, I think he just sees that and sees that even though this guy is a deserter, and even though he may have labeled him as being a coward initially, there's a lot of good that's here. And there's a lot of good that's coming from the family and the fact that he's gone on to create these two beautiful children. These beautiful children are very, they listen and they're happy and they've got their whole lives ahead of them. And turning him in would just break all that, would destroy it. And it would be so easy for him at that point just to walk away. No one would ever know any different. And I think he was doing it maybe more for, the wife and the two kids that really took him in. And, at one point, Cut entrusts him with his family's life, right? He says, Rex is wanting, and we didn't really set this up, but, these droids are kind of attacking the farm at this point later on in the episode. And, they've got 3 weapons. And Rex has got a hurt shoulder. He's got in a sling kind of thing. And Rex wants to immediately, what's he want to do? He wants to go to the front lines.
Right.
And Cut tells him, yeah, he wants to lead. And Cut's like, no, you can't. You're hurt. I need you to protect my wife and kids. You're my last, he tells him, you're my last line of defense for my family. I need you to do this for me. So Rex goes upstairs with the wife and kids while Cut stays at the bottom and is that first line of defense. And so having somebody like that, I think Rex sees that as another reason being that this guy who, they don't have the same views in terms of war and sense of duty and all of this stuff, trusts him. And even still now, out of in the short time that they've been together, and trusts him to protect his wife and his 2 kids. So I think that, along with the fact that, the beautiful family and all that mushy stuff that what I talked about earlier, I think those 2 things probably had shifted his mind a little bit, shifted his heart a little bit, and allowed him to just, again, turn that blind eye and say, you know what, this never really happened. I'm not going to go destroy all that. Because if he turned him in, he would have been turned in as a traitor and, court-martialed and all of that. So,
yeah, I think where it's going is he sees the values are so consistent with what they were bred to do. And you were paralleling it really nicely there, where the exact same things that they're bred to do in the Army is what he's doing with his family. It's just in a different way. Mm-hmm. And if Rex, I believe if Rex had seen him more in the coward space, or that he ran away just because he doesn't want to do this anymore, and had a little bit different story and had changed his core values and core behaviors, I think it would have been very different. I think Rex would have turned him in.
Yeah.
And
no,
said,
that's a good point.
Yeah, you're a disgrace, right? But he told him at the end of the episode, you're still a deserter, but you're definitely not a coward.
Yep.
And so I think it was that respect, that his core values were still in place, that he could still relate to and associate with. And again, that brotherly bond, is still there, even with, ones that aren't even in their batch, right? And so he could appreciate some level of that, but he didn't sacrifice who he was. Neither guy sacrificed who they were with their pursuit of what they wanted to do with their life.
Yeah, and as that episode ends, Rex is kind of heading out, and he basically says, "This is your home," and his last line is, "My family is elsewhere."
Right.
And he's, at this point, I wouldn't know, honestly, if this is the first time he's referred to his clones as family, like literally says it as family, but it was a poignant moment for me because it speaks to, again, his character development at this point in terms of where he's come. It just kind of hits home that they're not just soldiers, that they're not just, his minions that he's leading, that sort of thing. He really sees all of the clones and all of the people that serve under him and above him as his family. And that's where he wants to go back to. He's going to leave this family alone. He's going to go to his family now and do what he needs to do, much like Cut was doing in this episode. So.
Right. And I don't think that's foreign. I think we see a lot of examples of that throughout the Clone Wars with all sorts of clones and all of their different groups. They care about one another. And I think they probably use the word family probably more frequently than we might give them credit for. But it's definitely a tight community and it much more like a family than anything else.
So is this you had this question in there, is this a life Rex would ever want?
I don't know that he really understands it.
Yeah.
I don't think he gets it. I think it's very foreign to him, and I think it's confusing to him.
Yeah, I would agree.
And so this is where I'd like to see a book come out where you get this insight into what he's thinking for the next few days after this interaction, right? To see, he's recovering still, but he has a lot of time to think, maybe not in active duty for a week or two. And you get to see what his actual insight is. I think he would convince himself this is not the life he wants. He has a responsibility to the Republic. He has to protect it. He's responsible for his brothers. He has to protect them and lead them and do everything he can to ensure that there is a future to actually have. You fight for the future that you have because the Separatists want to destroy everything that the Republic stands for. And I don't think he could ever let that go until it betrays him.
Yeah, I don't know if he, again, I'm with you there. I don't think he ever really saw this as, being the life that he could learn. He has that one line in there that really makes me question, though, because when he's saying, if he says, what if staying in the Army what if I'm staying in the Army because it's meaningful for me, right? This is Rex explaining this to Cut.
Right.
He says, I'm part of the most pivotal moment in the history of the Republic. If we fail, and then he says, then our children and their children could be forced to live under an evil that I can't imagine. It's just interesting that he used that word, our children, and their children. And I don't, maybe he did that just subconsciously, didn't even realize that he was saying that. But, I don't think I think if at this moment, if he sat down and really thought about it, I'm with you still. I don't think he ever really sees this envisions this as a life that he would ever have or could have in any way whatsoever. But I think it does speak to that doubt that's been placed in his head. That'll be just, again, one cog in this larger picture that we're going to see a little bit later with him and him completely shifting and changing his thoughts on the war and thoughts on the Grand Army and, what it means to be, family and brothers and all of that. So,
but it's a conversation, that has to come up in the Army. what do you do when the war's over? What is that life after this going to look like? Now, granted, they've got no end in sight, so it's a bit of a moot point, and so they don't get a chance to really dwell on it. But you got to figure there's probably a fair number, and even among the leadership, they're like, what does this look like when we're done? What do they want with us? And they've questioned. I think we've seen it questioned a couple of times too. What is the life after this? They don't have a need for us, so then what? They just put us down, or what? So
yeah, and I think we get Cody. I think Cody goes on to train, doesn't he? He goes on to train some stormtroopers, the humans, and I think he hates it. Like, he hates that life. I don't remember where I'm pulling this from, but I know I've read it somewhere or watched it somewhere. But yeah, I mean, he was probably one of the lucky ones, like, because he was Commander Cody. What about that lowly trooper that just signed up and was just released, or not signed up, but just made, or literally came off the boat, and 2 days later the war is over? Now what? Right. Where did they go? I don't know. I don't think we know. All right. Well, we're going to end it right here, which is probably a good moment to end it. And when we come back, we will touch on Rex's continuing journey. We'll get into Darkness on Umbara and that whole Umbara arc. There's 4 episodes. So if you want to go ahead and listen to those, or watch those, I should say, prior to, in anticipation of episode 250, you can do that. I think we've got the General as was one of the other ones from that arc.
Yeah. Battle of Onderon. Yeah.
Yep. Battle of Onderon. That should be good, because we get to see Rex in a different light, as kind of a leader, as a trainer, and really his first taste of being a rebel, if you want to go that far.
Right.
And then we'll get into, obviously, we'll touch on some of his more of his maturity and development, and some of the relationships that he's going to have later on, especially as we get into Rebels. And I don't know, we're not going to really cover Return of the Jedi. We're going to cover his one scene in Return of the Jedi.
No.
Oh,
I'm not going to give that any credence, whatever the word is. Yeah. I don't listen to Bad Gamers too much. They say credits a lot.
Credits. And I skipped over Tup, but yeah, we'll get to that as well, and definitely get into activation of Order 66. And for those of you that don't know what happened there, we'll get into a little bit of the history and why he was, one, not around Commander Cody, and then 2, how he was able to pull off the inhibitor. So
yeah, so next week is going to be jam packed. So you'll want to tune back in, get up to speed if you have the opportunity to, because we're going to have a lot to talk about. It's a fitting show for episode 250 for us.
250. All right, 250. All right. So if you want to contact us, you can do so on Instagram at the CantinaCast, Twitter at the CantinaCast, Facebook /CantinaCast. You can shoot us an email at CantinaCastFanmail@gmail.com. Use that email address too, or even the social media pages if you'd like to send us a question. I've already got a few in there. I saw some today, so we're already kind of building up our next pile of questions for our listener Q&A stuff that we'll probably be doing here in a few more weeks still. But yeah, get the questions in via there, or if you want to come on to Discord, feel free to join us there. We've got a channel that's set up. You can throw your questions in there, and once we've got enough, we'll put a show together and get some answers for you. Excuse me. You can find us on iTunes, Patreon, and TeePublic. We'll have all those links in the show notes as well for you if you'd like to support the show in a lot of different ways. And I guess before we go, do you got anything else to say?
No, looking forward to Rex's next adventure here. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
So join us for episode 250. It's going to be a great time finally getting to this number, and then finally kind of wrapping up Rex. So until then, we will see you guys next week.
You're still listening? Wow. That's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.